Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any requests or notifications to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind you that this meeting is being webcast. Therefore, can I ask that you turn off, silence your mobile phones and ensure you speak clearly into your microphones. Can I also remind all members to sign the attendance register and confirm if any apologies have been received for this meeting. Declarations of interest. Could I ask if any members should have any declarations of interest that they may declare them now?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the declarations of interest, does the Chair need to push this?
He's turned it off.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chair. In relation to the declarations of interest, can I just remind members that any interest they do declare should be noted on the appropriate sheet which is attached to the attendance register, which I think has already been around members or will go around members. There's one interest I'm aware of, members, that's Councillor Gordon. Agenda item 5, the report in relation to adult services and the inspection of care and support for people with learning disabilities. Councillor Gordon, I understand you wish to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest in relation to that item, the reason being that it may have an impact upon your employment. Is that correct, Councillor Gordon? Thank you for that. Any other interests that members wish to declare or wish to ask me about at this point? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Minutes of the meeting. Can we move on to the last meeting? As we new members, can we just move on to the minutes?
Note the minutes.
Note the minutes.
Okay.
Right, action sheet. Could I ask Ellen to update members on the actions, please?
Okay, members, we've got 4 actions on the action sheet, 3 of which have been actioned and recommendations have been sent out to the committee. We've got 1 action on there. We're having some trouble getting a response back to recommendations from an Iron Bevan Health Board. We're still working on that, and as soon as we get a response, I'll still circulate that to the committee. Thank you.
Chair, can I come in there briefly in relation to Ellen's last information or lack of information from the Iron Bevan Health Board? Can I ask when it was first required?
This is from the last meeting of last year, which was March. So it's outstanding since March.
Can I also say that I'm very disappointed with that, the length of time that's involved, and that there should have been a reply. Very disappointed, Chair.
Chair, can I ask the committee to remind the executive member of the action? Perhaps it slipped his mind with everything since March. And,
Okay, thank you. Could I ask you to announce yourself, please?
My name is Bernard MacDonald. I'm an area manager with CSSIW, and I have just recently picked up Torvine Council following Anne Ferris's resignation.
Welcome to the meeting. Start off with the questions, please.
Yes, please, yeah, if I may. And the first one is Bernard, and like the chair said, welcome to the meeting. You say that you're new to the area. What area does your area cover as the regional manager?
I've been a CSSI area manager for 6 years. Mainly, I've covered Cardiff Council for that time, and also the Vale of Glamorgan. And I recently had about 12 months with Caerphilly as well. So mainly Cardiff and the Vale for that period of time.
Thank you, Bernard.
Ask you a question. How do services in Torvine compare to those across the region?
Difficult question. I've read the report because, as you know, I don't know if you know, I wasn't involved in the Learning Disability Review inspection. And looking at it as a sort of from the outside in, it reflects as a good report. And I think there's a good value base that Torvine have. And I think that's reflected all the way through. And if we look at the national inspection, it's not outside of the parameters of the recommendations from the national inspection. So the only other way that you could possibly monitor your performance against other councils is to maybe look at the other 6 councils that we went into, because those, obviously, we did data collection on the remaining councils, and that may give you, council, a picture of where you are in relation to other councils that we undertook the fieldwork in.
Thank you. Councillor Seaborn?
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning. Is the partnership working between Torvine and the United Bevan Health Board effective in making positive differences for our service users?
I can only go off the report because obviously I've not been involved in meeting with your officers and the director, although I've got a meeting next week with them, so I'll hopefully gain a better picture. But on reflection, the report does show that there's good partnership working. I think it's effective. I think it appears to work well and achieve good outcomes for people.
Thank you. Councillor Molson?
Good morning, Bernard. Is the action plan prepared to address the inspection findings appropriate? Are there any gaps within the findings?
I have reviewed your action plan. It's quite a comprehensive action plan. It sort of picks out some of the key themes and gives timescales which you want to try and measure about. The only, and I think it's more of a personal issue, where it says it's ongoing, it might be useful to have a date where it's reviewed so that it doesn't get lost in looking at the improvements that you want to make. But it looks like quite a robust action plan in terms of addressing the outcomes from the review.
Thank you. Councillor James?
Morning, Bernard. My question is progress against the prepared action plan at appropriate rate? It's very difficult to say whether progress is being made. If I could just read one little bit from our... sorry, bear with me one sec. From our local authority engagement and performance review that we sent through to the director. It talks about progress and recommendations arising from inspections. And it says, during the year, the authority was part of a national theme review of care and support for people with learning disabilities undertaken jointly by CSSIW and Healthcare Inspectorate Wales.
And it says, we found a number of models of good multi-agency working with health, with an emphasis on providing greater independence for those who are most in need. There were significant examples of good practice and support in place, which improves outcomes for people with learning disabilities. And then it goes on to say it was identified that further work was needed on developing and strengthening potential within the third sector and identifying innovative and universal services, particularly around more social opportunities for those who do not meet the threshold for support. So it's quite a positive statement in our, and it goes on to say that you've developed an action plan, and it's a positive development, and CSSIW will follow up on progress this year, so 17-18. It'll be part of the discussions that we would hold with the director and head of service when we meet, and also individually when we meet the heads of service as well, as part of our engagement with the authority.
Thank you, Bernard. Can I ask Nick Jones to ask a question, please?
Thanks, switch the microphone. Yes, good morning, Bernard. Bearing in mind that, what monitoring arrangements are in place to measure progress against the action plan?
We would be meeting, as I said earlier, we'd be meeting with the director and we'd be meeting with the heads of service, but also our regulated activities, our inspectors that go into the regulated settings within Torvine would be looking at how progress is being made, and we would discuss that at say, a team meeting to say, you know, we need to pick up on the learning disability reviews and any other reviews that CSSIW undertake as part of our regulatory activities. Is that? Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard. Can I ask Mike Jenmeyer?
As a result of the inspection, have the services in Torvine developed as required?
As far as I'm aware, there are no concerns that we have within the regulated activities in Torvine. I've asked our registration and enforcement team about areas of concern, and none have been identified. So it would appear that they're doing reasonably well as best. Yeah, and we have an enforcement pathway where we have services that may be of concern, and there's none in Torvine that are on that pathway.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Chair. Bernard, this is my second question, and some of these questions are overlapping, as you note. But my question is, did you find the self-assessment an accurate account of the position in Torvine?
Sorry. I had a really good look at the self-assessment, and it was the same that went out to all 22 authorities. And our review of Torvine did not pick up any concerns regarding your own self-assessment, and that's where I would have expected to find it. So I believe it's an accurate reflection of the service at that time.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Stewart. Thank you, Bernard. How does Torvine's quality assurance regime compare to that of other authorities, Bernard?
The honest answer is, I don't know. I'm sorry, but it's quite a difficult one. I did notice it was one of the recommendations that was made in the review of Torvine, but it was also a national theme that came across as well. I was just talking to your head of service out there about quality assurance because I knew it was an issue, because I believe Torvine feel that they have robust quality assurance measures in place. And I've looked at the report, and it discusses about case management. And I haven't been able to get hold of the person who led the inspection to try and find out what the meat behind the words are. So I don't know whether that was in relation to case management, and some case files may not have been reviewed, but without asking the people who were involved in that assessment, I can't really comment.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. Can I have Councillor Gordon, please?
Looking at page 40 and 2.4, I'll go slowly so you can...
This is in your paper?
Yeah. No, it's in the report. I just read it to you anyway. It's improvement needs, and it says that the local authority should ensure that there's a robust quality assurance in place. The response from the authority states that the local authority is satisfied it has a robust quality assurance in place. So, in your view, and in comparison with other local authorities, can the QA system be improved or strengthened?
I think part of your quality assurance. Quality assurance can always be improved, because as you find what works, then you can develop on some of the tools that you use. There's the quality assurance mechanism that you have with the Gwent Partnership Learning Disability that oversees. You've got the quality assurance with the director, and I think there's quite a strong statement made about the leadership of the authority in terms of the service that's being provided. And it's reflected in the handbook as well, the Adult Services Handbook, that the quality assurance is there. So that looking at the evidence, there is clear evidence that the authority is trying to make improvements around the quality of the services that it provides. And feedback from your advocacy groups, Torvine People First, will only support and enable the authority to move forward. So it reads like you've got good mechanisms in place to start looking at the quality of the service that's been provided.
Thank you very much. Councillor Seaborn?
Me again. As an authority, we're trying to get a grips on employing more people with disabilities. Can you give us some idea of how other authorities work to employ their people with learning disabilities, please?
I would like to, but that's not an area that we would sort of cover. I know a number of authorities are looking at ways of providing work experience within the authority, but that's not the same as employment, is it? But it's always a first step to moving on, and if people want to then get the skills to move on, that is a good way of doing it. I read in the response that the difficulties and the challenges that there are in today's market in employing people, but maybe there are ways of enabling people to move forward. I think you've got this innovation post that's been created that's looking at the ways in which services want to be shaped by the people, and that may be an area that could be further developed in terms of employment. But in terms of what other local authorities are doing, it's not a question that we ask, really. I think it's just been part of the theme for the Learning Disability Review. And there's not a lot reflected in the national report around employment that I could pick up.
Thank you very much.
Can I come in briefly there, Chair, on the back of Rosie's question?
Yep.
I hear what you were saying, Bernard, about you haven't picked that up, but would it possibly be a good idea to pick it up in future to get best practice out of authorities?
I think you're right. I think it would be a good idea. And as part of this, I can go back and feed that back to our managers and say maybe it's an area that we should consider, maybe as part of the engagement review with the heads of service and the director. Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? I'd like to thank Mr MacDonald for answering all questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You can either stay if you want to, or...
I could stay.
Can I just ask a question? Was there anything that you wanted to inform us of that we may need to do some work on?
No, not that I'm aware of. I think it'd be... I'm not sure how your scrutiny works, but to bring it back and keep it under review and look at the progress that's been made would be my response, the same way that we would do with our engagement with the councils as well. And it sounds like, according to our review, is that you're on the right path.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would
it be possible to just ask another supplementary question? Is that okay? Sorry. Councillor Jones.
Councillor James.
Jones, yeah. I was just going to ask, you mentioned the third sector was a gap in the report. Is there any way we could be homing in on that, do you think?
I think that's a challenge for all authorities as we try and, because part of their social service wellbeing act is engaging that third sector and trying to promote it. And in some ways it might be early days. We're in the first full year now, we've just completed it as we move in, and to try and see what there is out there. I think you've done a good audit on some of the things. You've got nice Torvine People First, and you developed a video that looked like it was really successful about how people want. And I think it's moving on from there and looking wider than council services and seeing what there is out there, and also wider than day services as well, which is what you're doing. But it's a challenge for all authorities, I think, as these new services start to develop around advocacy and how people use it. And there's so many different advocacy services now out there that then it's like who works best for Torvine, really, is a decision that you have to make. But yeah, challenges ahead, I think, but they're there to be sort of taken on board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I invite executive members and
It's council officers and
council officers and
Julie Hall from an Iron Bevan.
Julie Hall from an Iron Bevan Court. Welcome to our committee. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
I'm Jill Patlett. I'm Head of Adult Services.
Jim Wright. I'm Innovation and Development Manager in Adult Services.
I'm Julie Hall, Directorate Manager for Learning Disability Services in an Iron Bevan Health Board.
I'm Cathy Marshall. I'm the Team Manager of the Learning Disabilities team.
And I'm Sarah Paxton, and I'm Group Manager in Adult Services.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Jim Wright to present us with a presentation.
The report since it's been written.
Any updates on the report that's been written?
I think, if we may, Chair, that Jim's presentation will probably pick up on a lot of the recent work. So rather than duplicate what Jim's going to present now, is it okay that if there's any queries after that we pick them up?
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Whilst we are waiting, it's probably, I mean, as you're aware, it's just, obviously this inspection took place, certainly the site inspection, back in January 2016. So unfortunately, CSSIW weren't able to attend the scrutiny committee scheduled for, I think it was last March. So yes, things have progressed since then, and I'd say hopefully from today's session that you will be reassured by the progress that we've made on the areas that were identified in the report. I think we were started from quite a positive place, certainly from the work that's being done across health and social care. I think it was recognised in the report that there was very strong commitment from staff at the front line, with some good and excellent examples of positive outcomes around how staff were working together to gain good outcomes for individuals, and the strong value base and leadership that we have across the borough. When we obviously revisited this, I think, gosh, January 2016 seems quite a long time ago. But obviously it's absolutely right and proper that we picked up on this, obviously with this cycle of scrutiny. I appreciate that Bernard, unfortunately, is a new regional inspector that's only been kind of had responsibility for Torvine for, I think, probably the last 2 weeks. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't realise you were. So we're due to meet next week. So just the timing, really, because normally on our regular one-to-ones, we would have any inspection action plans or whatever on the agenda, so that we would be picking that up on a regular basis. But to be fair to Bernard, he's new in the job. Well, not new in the job, but responsibility for Torvine has been a new addition.
This isn't going well, is it? The screen's just gone dead as well. There we are. Is that working? Yeah, great. Try not to touch anything. Apologies, this was intended as a half an hour presentation, so I'm going to skip some slides as I go through and try and condense it as meaningful as I can. Better Future Lives, Co-Producing Change is the title. It's about a piece of work that I've been co-producing with people with learning disabilities in Torvine. Co-producing, if you don't know, it's when you decide together, when you do things together. Not just consulting with people, you actually involve people in every stage of the process. So is it a good time to rethink how we do things? And could co-producing give us better commissioning, a focus on better lives for people that we work with, new ways of working, more efficient services, and help us develop more fair and more equal systems, and to look at people's strengths rather than people's needs and deficits. It's not easy to co-produce, because I think sometimes it kind of goes a little bit against what we've been doing before. To having to relearn the way we work was quite difficult. It did put me outside my comfort zone, but I think over the last 12 months, I think it's really been worth it, and hopefully in the presentation I can show you why that is. So the background for the Better Future Lives project was that we had some funding from the Intermediate Care Fund, which is now called, Jill, the something else, Integrated Community Care Fund. There was a focus on Torfaen within the work, but it did have a wider view across Gwent, and some of the benefits will hopefully be seen across Gwent, not just in Torfaen. It was about recognising the need for innovation and alternative ways of working to our normal ways of working. And what we need is really good quality, really good value, new models of care in our systems. And what we've realised we needed to do, and it was flagged up in the CSSIW report, was that we needed to engage and involve stakeholders in a different way. Not the normal questionnaires or meetings, but looking at how we can really involve stakeholders completely differently and more. And also a recognition that commissioning needs to change, that we need to commission the way we commission our services needs to be different. And it's responding to the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and the Future of Generations Act, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act as well. The purpose of the work was to work with people locally and nationally as designers and developers and deciders of what we were doing. And that is quite, it might seem like it's a throwaway sentence, but that's the nub of it, that's the difficult bit, when you involve people who have learning disabilities as deciders, as equals, as developers and deciders in that process. And the view was to look at how we could develop things and do things differently. Under the banner, what is a better future for you? What's a better future for people with learning disabilities? We wanted to improve the ways that we work with people, and we wanted to ensure that our processes were much more person-focused than they are. Again, like I say, taking that strengths-based approach, that's really important that we look at people's strengths, what people are able to do. I think our assessment systems in the past sometimes focus on needs and deficits, what people can't do, rather than what we can do. And that's what came through quite strong in our research, really. It also included we wanted to look at responses that we didn't normally do, the preventative stuff, the stuff that's upstream of our normal responses. Not only in public service, but also in the third sector as well. And we wanted to reduce waste and inappropriate responses. What Better Future Lives was unique because people were involved from the start, people with learning disabilities designed it, they developed it, and they ultimately decided it. That's pretty rare. In Wales, I don't think it's really been done to this level before. It's kind of unique. And we produced an accessible final report, completely easy read. The People First group in Torfaen and across Gwent equally owned that report. It was their report as much as it was a council document, as much as it was a third sector document. It was people with learning disabilities report. We also work with a company called Barod. They are an organisation, community interest company that have half their employees have a learning disability, half of them don't. They all get paid the same. It's a real cooperative kind of model. It's very interesting. And they're real experts at analysing information and giving them some really good advice. We engage with the third sector, the voluntary sector partners, schools, colleges, local people, parents, carers, business professionals right across the board. We did that in a different way. I met people in cafes and talked to them in cafes and asked the question, what's the best future life for people with learning disabilities? And we raised, and I know we will continue to raise public awareness of different, and professional awareness of different ways of working. And it wasn't just looking at something in isolation, it was looking at the whole thing, not just an adult social services response, not just a third sector response, but how it all fits together and how we work together to get the best future for people with learning disabilities. One of the things important in co-production is us and them. We think in terms of us and them. And when you ask the questions, has anybody ever used a service? Has anybody ever cared for somebody? Has anybody ever belonged to a group? Then most of us, at some level, say, actually, yeah, that's part of us as well. And if you view yourself as a citizen, a taxpayer, and a member of the public, that's everybody. So when you're co-producing, it's about disempowering yourself, in a sense, that as an officer or an employee of the council, that we're actually working as individuals together. So co-production makes us all us. There's no space for them in that. It's a team. You become one team. This is quite an interesting, you may have seen it before, but we talk about equality and we talk about equity. And reality sometimes is there, that the one of the most powerful have the most, and those who have the least often have the least. But liberation is taking those barriers away, and that's kind of what we're trying to achieve as well. I think there's a number of steps. I won't go into these in details of the process, but we had to start with the decision to inform, to consult, to involve. How we did that. We had to make the environments right. It meant choosing the right environments where you work with people. You help them. They choose the environments, make it accessible, safe. There's no negative associations. And it was focusing on really what's important. What to include, the must-haves, the endpoints, the goals in that process. And we tried to make it as enjoyable as we could. One of the things in co-production that is really important is deciding how you decide. I suppose in council business, you've got your processes there. We had to make the rules up, which were clear, honest, there was no bias. We agreed what the decisions were and who was involved, and we recorded those decisions and made them accessible. I think step 5 was about skills and experience are used in the process of change. One thing that came is, I should have known it before really, but the people with learning disabilities are the experts about their own experience. And if you involve people as experts, then it changes the way you will deliver a service. We think we're the experts, but unless you're living something, you don't really understand it in the same way. So I think when you really engage with people as experts in their own lives to design new services, then you get something completely different, something quite unexpected sometimes, but always better. That we all have different skills we can offer. Everybody has a valid opinion, and people have the space to develop their skills and their voice. That sometimes takes time. We made everything accessible, which I'm rushing through this because I know we've only got a short period of time. And progress is measured in the changes in people's lives. So what's important when doing this kind of work is look at the baseline that you have, decide what the change is going to be, how important is it, and then you measure it and agree that timeline. This is in Tolvine's People First words. This is what they did. They talked about what they thought was important. They made lists. They decided the questions and tried them out in People First. They changed them. They sent them out to all the other People First groups across Gwent to see what they thought. They changed the questions again, retested them, and then they decided on the questions and tried them out in Tolvine People First. They went out to different groups in Scope and Evolve and Able Radio and TNAB and Elevate and Thursday Club, and they asked all their members. They put all that information, so they're asking people basically what's a better life, put it all together, put it onto a computer, and then Burrard helped them write the report. And then I went out and found out loads of stuff about good practice, what's good elsewhere across well, not just across Gwent, but across the whole of the country, and worked there further. And I went out and had coffee conversations with families and professionals, and it was quite good to mix people up, to have commissioners sat alongside parents and social workers and care workers and frontline staff. That was quite really interesting conversations that came out. I went to St Hilda's Church and Lanthanum Grange and the Heritage Centre and Pontypool Museum and Llanfairpwll Grange. And then we had a big conference. 130 people attended that conference. They told us what a better future could look like in that conference as well. So we got a vast amount of opinion there about what is a better future for people with learning disabilities. So we took those views. We had 100 best practice ideas. We carried out population needs and analysis, and we looked at what could be built on. We drew all that together. And what came out of it is probably not that surprising in some ways. That people want a life. It's about independence. Let me lead the life the way I wanted to lead it. You know, and let me take risks. It's feeling safe and taking responsibility. If I make a mistake, you know, that's my choice, really. And sometimes we put safety before independence, and what people are saying, actually, independence is much more important. Working together with families and support workers, professionals and services and how they're commissioned. Independence included money and work and social life. All those things were really important. People having access to their own money. People wanted paid work. Having a social life was really important. I mean, if we could say the same for ourselves, can we really? You know, money, work and social life are essential components of anybody's life, really. But when you start to look at some people's lives with learning disabilities, their access to their own money, their ability to have paid work, and even to have an independent social life, they're not the same as what we would have. So. The key themes about work is that most people that we spoke to wanted paid work, at least part-time, and they want to be paid for their work. And we looked at ways in which that can happen. And the key themes about social life were that people wanted the opportunity to develop sexual relationships, natural support rather than paid support. There were situations sometimes where people are going on a date and they've got 2 support workers with them and things like that. But it's also important to know how to feel safe, to stay safe, and know about the risks and responsibilities, to be able to do some of that stuff as well. And we looked at the services for people with learning disabilities and some of the issues for commissioning around that, about the standards and what providers need to focus on and how to link things together much more better within the community and what's commissioned, and getting agencies to work together better, and also looking at how we use direct payments to micro-commission some stuff as well. Working together, I mean, is a key theme. Comes out. Nothing really good comes from working in isolation. I think the best things come from collaboration and working together, sharing information, communicating, being aware of the power that we have and trying to reduce our power and give other people power is really important. I won't go into all the stuff that came out of our services, but it's about looking at how we develop services around outcomes, how we develop more user-led services, how we sort out some of the problems around transition. These are some of the issues that came out from that research. After we got all that information together, the people with learning disabilities then decided what's the next steps. What are we going to do that's going to make a difference? We've got 6 months to do this. What are 4 projects that we can do that will make a difference? They chose four projects. There were Safe Places, Digital Connections, the Gwent Marketplace, the Gwent Charter and the Jobs Marketplace. Safe Places launches on the 9th of October in Cwmbran, and a safe place will help a vulnerable person if they're scared or at risk while they're out in the community or need support. We've worked with Cumbrian Shopping, Dementia Friends, Autism Friendly Communities to create those safe places for people to go in Cumbrian. We're also working on stuff in Pontypool and Blenheim, which will start the steering group there shortly as well. Digital connections, we've developed a training package for people with learning disabilities, developed by people with learning disabilities, to use technology to help them connect with other people. They'll know how to keep themselves safe, they'll know what works, and they work with people with different needs, and work with other partners to make that happen. So with that's just starting too. The train's all prepared and everything. And we've got a Gwent Charter which launches next week, next Thursday. The Gwent Charter is something that organisations, individual workers and families, carers can all sign up to. It's based on what we found out, and all the individuals, when the organisations or individuals sign it, it means they promise to do what the Charter says. So it's a pledge that we will carry out some of the things that we found out in that little bit of research. We've also been working on something called the Jobs Marketplace. Work was really important. It's not the easiest one to do, but I've put together with People First a business proposal, working with Keith and other partners and our Mental Health and Learning Disability Partnership, to look at what we can do across Gwent, actually, about getting people into work, people become self-employed, how we can use direct payments differently, and how we can develop business opportunities for community groups. We're measuring the difference that the projects make to different lives. I'm using a tool called Benefits Impact Assessment. So it sounds fancy, but basically you look at the different people involved in it, what are the benefits for those different people, those different groups, and then we map the impact that has on those different people and individuals. We're working across organisations and across counties, we're building bridges, we're breaking down barriers in this piece of work. And that's it. Hopefully that's okay.
Thank you very much. Start the question then. Can you explain what improvement is needed in respect of AULT, self-care, adult self-guiding and dolls?
Thank you. Part of my role is to be the professional lead for Mental Capacity Act and dolls, and in fact, the Scrutiny Committee in the past has scrutinised dolls. It's a very complex area of law. It is a safeguard for people, and it's kind of difficult to explain it unless you've got a level of understanding of what it means. But in Torfaen, the report that CSSIW did recognised, and we had recognised, we have people living in the community, in their own homes, in supported living, in shared life settings, whose care and support regime comes within deprivation of liberty. So they are under continuous supervision and control, and they're actually not free to leave. That sounds very negative, but actually for some people that's actually quite a positive thing. And we recognise that we have about 100 people that we know about in those settings who are deprived of their liberty, and in order to make that lawful, we need to make applications to the Court of Protection for an authorisation to deprive them of their liberty. That's an awful lot of people, and each application, just the cost of the application itself is £500 without then the officer time and the legal time. So we don't, and committee heard this in the past, we don't have the resources haven't been made available for us to make all of those applications all at the same time. So we have in place a mechanism in which we triage, if you like, those people that are in highest need, the deprivation is most pressing. So they will be people who might be objecting to their care and support regime, and they might be regularly trying to leave, and so those are the applications that we would prioritise and do first. Dolls, only applies to people that lack capacity to agree to their support and care arrangements. So there are other people who aren't deprived of their liberty because they're caring, so they're agreeing to their care and support. We keep all of those people under review. Jill, as Head of Services, working with her other heads of service across Gwent to increase the legal capacity we have to perhaps employ another solicitor across Gwent to take some of these cases forward. And we know it's a risk, it's part of our risk register, and it is certainly something that we keep a very close eye on.
Sorry, Chair, could I just add that a recent case, Sarah's just pointed out there, the actual application is £500, but a recent court of protection case, well, the one that we're currently working with now, I think the cost of that case will probably be in the region of about £25,000 with the legal costs and the barrister's costs. So just to put that is a case that's being contested, so that is, a lot of the cases wouldn't be at that level. However, that gives you a bit of an idea of, actually, we're not just talking of, £500 and an hour's time from an officer or solicitor. We are talking, 3, 4, 5, 6 court appearances with barristers and a significant amount of documentation that needs to be developed and presented to court.
Councillor James?
Could I give my apologies to everybody now, but I need to leave the meeting. Really sorry, and thank you to me too.
Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. It's going on from what you just said about the cost and what Jill has just said as well. I understand the reason to triage and prioritise, but would you agree that the cost is very innovative and possibly people are being left out because of the cost?
Yes, it's recognised essentially. The government asked the Law Commission to review the whole of the Doles scheme, which they have done. They produced a report and a draft bill, which they submitted to government in 13th of March 2017. It now waits the government to consider that report, but it would be to completely change the current Doles scheme, because there's recognition that all parts of the system, so not just health boards, local authorities, but the courts themselves, cannot manage with the increased number of people that come into Doles. And without wanting to go into the technical details, there was a Supreme Court case known as Cheshire West that overnight changed the understanding of what was a deprivation of liberty, and something like a 10 to 16 fold increase in the number of people, and no part of the system can actually cope with that level of increase. So the government instructed the Law Commission to undertake this review. The issue we have, of course, is with everything else that's going on in national government, when government will be able to look at this issue and the Law Commission's bill, none of us know, so we're still waiting. In the meantime, we have to apply the current legislative system.
Thank you very much for that. Chair, that when that information becomes available, it comes back to this committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordon?
First question is a really simple one. So in the report it talks about people receiving their equipment that meet their personal needs in a timely manner. Can you confirm this is now happening?
Yeah, a piece of work has been completed since the report came out. We have GWISIS, which is the Gwent-wide. So sometimes you use acronyms, and I'm trying to think what it is. It's a Gwent-wide equipment service, where we've done a piece of work with practitioners looking at agreeing the pathways. I think it's particularly around postural chairs. So there's now a pathway in place across health and social care that looks to as an allocation of 50-50 funding, so that individual clients don't really get stuck in the system.
The question, Councillor Gordon? Councillor Moulton.
Thank you, Chair. My question, what sort of cases are prioritised and what are the cost of the implications?
Is that in relation to dolls? I think Sarah might have already alluded to that, in that the cases that are prioritised are those where individuals are objecting to the care and support that they're receiving, and also the costs. As I think we might have identified that it could be £500 for just an application, but it could be as much as £25,000 a case where it's particularly complex. So it's
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask the question whether or not that comes out of the social services budget, or is there another budget that you can link into?
Comes out. This comes out of the adult social services budget. I think when the Welsh Government allocated funds, we had in the region of, and I'm going to look to Sarah now because it's about something silly like £3,000 or something.
Yes, post Cheshire West judgment, Welsh Government made available to all local authorities additional resources. Torvine's addition was around £3,000. We're in which I think everybody recognises was insufficient to meet the demand. We are in a pooled consortia arrangement across Gwent, with having a Gwent Dolls team that manage some of that work. They manage the work of people who are in care homes and hospitals, and anybody else who is deprived of their liberty in the community. It falls back to us in adult social care.
Councillor Moulton.
We discussed that it could take up to 3 to 6 court appearances at the cost of £25,000 and above. How often does this happen within a 12-month period?
We've currently got, we've just finished 2 cases. We've had 5 cases at the moment in the Court of Protection, all of which relate to deprivations of liberty. They all have slightly different focus. So we've just concluded 2 cases. There are 3 more ongoing, and we know there are likely to be another few cases that we will have to progress into the court. So we are really talking considerable amounts of money here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeremiah. Right, okay. Councillor Jones.
I just wanted to ask, are any of these people in receipt of continuing care? And if they do, who costs that? Who pays for that?
Yes, some of them might be, but actually whether it's irrelevant for dolls whether they're funded by the local authority in terms of their care and support or under continuing health care, because if they're in the community, then we are the supervisory body, so we have to make those applications.
Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. We've all discussed the implications of the financial costs and the legal implications. Do we use in-house legal services or do we go outside for these services?
A mixture of both, and as Sarah mentioned, it's a piece of work that I've been leading across the Gwent authorities. We all recognise we need additional legal input. A recent case, we've had to go out and commission external legal input because our own internal legal services haven't got the capacity, and I recognise why, as the numbers that we're talking about. But a more cost-effective way would be to commission additional support. So we know that there's approximately 770 cases across Gwent that are all being triaged as they are in Torvine. So we have had discussions with Delith and Tim around Torvine hosting, certainly to start off with an additional maybe 2-year temporary post, purely just focusing on the Court of Protection cases across Gwent. The reason why we would look across Gwent, obviously, whilst all cases are different, there will be some similarities. So if we can build up some expertise within that legal support, it does make it easier rather than going out and commissioning with individual local solicitors, because certainly some experience means that has shown that it doesn't make it as easy as it could be.
Thank you for that, Jill, because I did realise that our legal team are a small team, and I wondered if that was the case. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mike Jeremiah?
Before I ask my question, Jill and Helen and I visited a group down in Old Cumbran a couple of weeks ago. Very impressed, very impressed. They knew what they wanted. They were out in the community working, and they weren't afraid to criticise. And I congratulate that group down there. They were absolutely brilliant that day. My question is, how are you monitoring the impact of funding received?
Can I just clarify, the funding received, is that linked to the intermediate care fund? Yeah, or integrated care fund as it is now. Some of the bid that we originally did, which was on behalf of Gwent, identified a number of things that we were expecting, which was kind of the review that was of the evidence-based review of best practice, the forming of the engagement with local people across Gwent and their carers, as Jim has already said, and certainly around establishing certain pieces of work streams that we would expect to be delivered on. And I think Jim's presentation earlier has showed actually that's what intermediate care, integrated care fund is funding, is Jim's post. So all the work that Jim has been doing and the products that Jim has showed you today, we monitor that through the Mental Health and Learning Disability Partnership Board. So Jim has regularly reports back to that board so we can actually see what the impact of that money is giving. But that funding is actually only till the end of March of this year. So as Jim, I think, alluded to earlier, when he said the work with the co-production work was actually, we've now got 6 months.
Yes.
What can we focus on in 6 months? Because we know that at the end of that 6 months, the funding for Jim's post will cease. But there might be some other, is there anything else that you want to add to that, Jim?
Yes, yeah. I think each of the projects that we're taking forward from the, as I mentioned, the Safe Places as UN chart, for each of those, we've got what's called a benefit impact tool. So it lists, for instance, if we looked at the work project, individuals with learning disabilities, what's the impact of that project? Paid work. What's the impact on members of the council? What's the impact on social services? Well, so we look at all that and what impact we're going to have as a result of these projects. And you see actually that it's not just people with learning disabilities who's going to be benefiting, it's also going to be their carers, it's also going to be the services that we provide and the service, and the amount of money that we spend on services, because people are more independent, they wouldn't need to access the same level of services. So each one you'll see that there's that kind of breakdown for each activity that we're taking forward as well. And that will be presented to the Learning Disability Partnership Board as well as evidence.
Thank you very much. Councillor Seabold?
Thank you, Chair. Now I can say that the inspector's gone. One of the points there where he said we could improve is the timescale on the report where it says ongoing. Perhaps we should have some dates. And one of the points that I want to bring up is on page 3822. And it's how exactly will you support the third sector to contribute to services for those with learning disabilities? And what new service models have been developed to date?
I think some of the stuff in the presentation has answered that we did a lot of work with the third sector in those cafe conversations and talking to providers around what's really important and what their ideas were for the future. And there was, they'd not had that conversation for a while, and I think it was what came out of it was really interesting. And what it does is bring together the third sector instead of being in competition about collaborating to deliver the best services that they can. I think what I was saying about different commissioning models, sometimes our commissioning models create competition, which can be unhealthy. But if we can develop the ways of working with the third sector, that are collaborative and more of a partnership approach, then I think we'll achieve better results.
Could I add to that, if I may? I think it's, whilst I understand that the comment around ongoing is potentially you could lose sight. I think the way that we work in Torvine, that we don't lose sight, but we also recognise it is ongoing, because this isn't a one-off conversation with the third sector. It is about development, and that's going to take time. But I just would like to give reassurances that the ongoing doesn't mean it goes off the radar. As I said, we do. The action plan is tabled whenever I have my one-to-one with the regional inspector, so that we obviously that is monitored on a quarterly basis about what we're doing there. Also, I know that there's obviously some work that Jim's been doing with the third sector, but about developing different models. There's also a lot of work that's been going on with the RSLs, and if it's okay, Chair, maybe that Cathy, you could just comment on that.
It's one of the things that's come out from previous communications with individuals is that they want different housing options as well, that historically people with a learning disability either lived with their families or they lived in supported accommodation. And previously people have told us that they want as much independence as they can manage. They want their own front door in many cases, as we all do. So we've developed a very good working relationship with the RSLs, and particularly with Melin Housing. Some of you may already be aware of the Kynant Learning Disability Development, which was 9 flats, one of which is still used as a training flat to give people an opportunity to see what it's like to live independently. And then very recently, it was in August, that Somerton House was completed, and that's a wider social care development. It has independent living flats for people with learning disabilities and other vulnerable adults. It has 4 wheelchair accessible units for people one of which we're keeping back at the moment for a sort of step down option for people who are being discharged from hospital. And then we've also got a higher needs unit, which is a 4-bedded unit where people with a learning disability have their own flat, but there is staff support 24/7. We've got another accommodation project coming online in another couple of years. So we're sort of looking to see what people want, what people aspire to, and then we're working with the RSLs to develop those options.
I'd just add as well, we've been able to do this by working very closely with our housing strategy colleagues in social care and housing to enable us to actually look at what we need and then make that a reality.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Stuart Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And also, I don't know whether you are aware, I should imagine you admitted that there are facilities in Blenavon that are opening recently, and that's in conjunction with the Northern and Bevan Health Board. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moulton.
Sorry, thanks. We were discussing then about those that would like to go independent living. Do we have a number of people that could possibly be waiting to go into accommodations?
Yeah. We've obviously offered a lot of people recently accommodation who we knew were waiting. We're in the middle at the moment of doing a wider scoping exercise within learning disabilities and indeed across adult social care in order to ensure that any provision that comes online, there is a need for it. At the moment, it looks like there is still a number of people younger people in particular are looking for different housing options. They want to leave home earlier than perhaps historically people with learning disabilities did, and they want what everybody else wants in their early 20s, which is to live as independently as they can. So yes, we do some work around making sure that there is still that need out there, so that we don't end up with too much.
Can I add one comment, Chair? There is also an In One Place group, which is a group that across health, social care and housing that look at to identify appropriate accommodation needs right across Gwent. We recently, as Monday, I attended a workshop where we agreed that we'd be looking at doing an analysis of those clients that were what we call on the transition register. So this is service users from the age of 14 that we will know. We can do some analysis as they are coming through the system, you say, and are growing up, about what their housing needs would be, so that we can start to do that development of a 3 to 5 year housing programme. And it might be linked to an individual about having some real specific needs that might need a bespoke housing option, to a number of, okay, there might be 4 clients who have these specific needs, there might be 3 clients that have that specific need. So we're going to do that analysis right across Gwent, and obviously all the RSLs and registered social landlords are involved in that, and then we'll be mapping out exactly what properties are available, what land is available, what funding is available. So we're going to start that exercise from when that person is 14 to start to have that. And we will then look at that on a year-by-year basis, because what we do on a yearly basis is what we call a roll call. So that's that list of people, children, young people known to the borough. That's updated, I think, September, October, Sarah?
It's usually after half. It's usually after half term. We let the children kind of get settled into that year 9, and then we look at who they are. So we have what we call it like a master list, really, which we add to, just so that we can track those people that might need multi-agency transition planning, and we do that with education, with our children and family service, and our health board colleagues as well.
So, the children now at an early age and looking towards the future for them to lead an independent life. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart-Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I want to labour the point about the organisations we are working with, the RSLs, as you said, the United and Bevan Health Board. But I understand that we are also working with religious groups as well that provide support and properties. Is that correct?
I have to say, Councillor Evans, there isn't a particular case that's coming to mind at the moment, but that's not to say I don't know every single case, that's known to adult services. So I'm quite happy to have a conversation with you to submit and find some more information if that's...
That's fine. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. Question, Councillor?
Apologies.
I think it's some rehab service for people with drug and alcohol issues, I think, possibly. I don't know much about it, but that would be through supporting people's funding, which nobody here works in that area, unfortunately.
But I can have a conversation and check that out if that's okay.
Yeah. Councillor Gordon?
Stop. So in the report, the inspector writes that the local authority should ensure that there is a robust quality assurance in place, and the local authority responds with that they're satisfied that they have a robust and quality assurance in place. So in your view, and in comparison with other local authorities, can the quality assurance system be improved or strengthened?
Yes, I mean, as you picked up from the report, our response back to CSSIW was that we did a very comprehensive self-assessment prior to the inspection, and I think our self-assessment absolutely mirrored kind of any comments that were picked up by CSSIW. We're very well aware of areas that we need to improve on. If your question about can we improve, I think there's always room for improvement. However, I think we have very good oversight of individual cases. We have a well-developed performance management framework. We have a handbook, which actually for every activity that you would expect a practitioner to be going through, there is a quality assurance process that's written into the handbook. And I think when you look across Wales, certainly when I've spoken to my colleagues at the heads of service meetings and things, one of the first areas where you've got, when you've got difficulties around finance to go is around the quality assurance, whereas we've been absolutely adamant in adult services that we've retained a social work and practitioner post at assistant team manager level that focuses on improvement. So whilst I would always accept there will be room for improvement, I am certainly reassured that and confident that we do have robust systems in place.
Thank you. Further question, Councillor Gordon?
Do you want me to start again? Sorry. In the presentation, you talked about learning disabilities, highlighting the fact that they want employment opportunities. So have the council considered a wide approach to developing employment opportunities, thinking of the tendering process and of contracts?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it slightly in the presentation, that the piece of work about a business proposal that's been worked on with the director and with the Mental Health and Learning Disability Partnership Board, essentially putting that case forward about what we need to commission, what we could do differently as a council, how we could become an exemplary employer within the council and take that initiative. We do employ a lot of people. Could we do more to employ people with learning disabilities and mental health issues and disabilities generally within the council? I think we could, and that's in that proposal to be taken forward. And also to look what contractual arrangements, what commission we would need to do if we were to support people into employment more. And there are some good areas of best practice from elsewhere that we've looked at, where councils are doing just that. In fact, moving significant numbers of people out of services and into employment when they really put their mind to it.
Thank you. How do other local authorities and health boards provide employment opportunities?
It's a mixed picture, to be honest, Chair. There's across England and Wales and Scotland, about half the local authorities really invest in supporting employment. Not all local authorities do. Locally, Rhondda Taff and Bridgend have contracts with an external provider for supported employment. Newport have an in-house provision. Most of the other counties of Gwent don't have any contractual agreements in place for supported employment. There are some really good areas of good practice in Gloucester, in Newham, in Kent. They've costed the amount it costs for supported employment, particularly if you take a preventative approach, which actually saves the council money in the long run. And that's kind of very well evidenced, in fact. So there's a good business case for doing it, but not all councils do it, unfortunately.
Chris?
I just wondered, how do we compare historically, not just in Torfaen but across Gwent, with having people with disabilities in employment now to what we did a few years back or many years back? Has it got worse?
I don't have the figures locally, but nationally, yes. There has, over recent years, there has been a downturn, possibly post-austerity kind of measures, where there are more people with a learning disability out of work than previous, and it's very low anyway. We're talking about of the people with learning disabilities who could actually work, who have the ability to work, less than 7% on average. And locally, I estimate it to be about 5%, looking at the people that are known to us.
I think that's an area we need to look into a little bit more, isn't it?
I certainly think so, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seaborn?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about partnership working, and many years ago when I was in a certain place at a certain time, partnership seemed to be the word of the decade. And we were the first to appoint a joint position between the Torfaen Council and the United Bevan Health Board, or Torfaen Local Health Board when it was then. And my question is the effective partnership working making positive differences for our service users?
I think I'll refer back to the original report by CSSIW, and I think that in that report they acknowledged that there was some good and excellent examples of work on the front line across health and social care staff that were resulting in some extremely positive outcomes for individuals. As many of you will know, the social care and health colleagues with learning disability are co-located. They work day to day, side by side. So they're having those discussions around individuals. They're very committed, and there's a real passion and enthusiasm to ensure that the best outcomes are attained for the individuals. That goes right up through all levels of through to senior officer at my grade, and Keith and Sarah and Julie. There is commitment at all levels to achieving those positive outcomes. In fact, we recently relocated to ensure that that the health and social care staff can remain together, because that's an effective way of working.
On reading the report, it looks as if you've gone wider than where we were some years ago, and the Gwent area is now coming into all the partnership working, and it looks to be a good.
We have the Mental Health and Learning Disability Partnership Board, where there are a number of partners on that board, represented on that board, but it is a Gwent board. We, as you would expect, do more and more work on a Gwent an ABU UHB footprint as far as strategy. But we deliver that on a local basis, the staff on the front line working together.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Julie to make a comment on that, please?
I would just like to echo what Jill has said in relation to the positivity that CSSIW recognised in terms of the partnership working on the ground and right through, and that was actually demonstrated within the Health Inspectorate Wales report as well. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just going to add that there are we've got provider forums, we've also got partnership boards locally and regionally that are hosted in Torfaen quite regularly, well attended by a variety of third sector partners as well.
Okay, thank you. Ask the question, how will you measure the effectiveness and impact of DEWIs?
The quick answer is going to be hits on the site. We are live in Torfaen currently. However, we haven't officially launched DOIS at the moment, as obviously a site is only as good as the information that's on it. So what we absolutely need to double check is that we've got all the appropriate information on there and everything is up to date before that is officially launched. That is obviously managed through TVA. DOIS is kind of funded through Welsh Government, so the monitoring and the effectiveness will also have that Welsh Government oversight. But we will be able to look at locally how many hits
that has, and also what type of questions are being asked. So are there areas then that maybe, are there questions that are being asked that maybe the information is not on the site? We could then use that information to kind of develop the next steps.
Okay, thank you very much. Mike Jeremiah?
Regarding the Safe Places scheme developed by members of the People's First, have you considered advertising the launch and raising awareness via the council's social media?
Yeah, it's in hand. We've just written a press release, invites going out to leaders and members of the council, etc. So yeah, there will be a press release. Hopefully we'll get the BBC there as well. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon?
Right, so what is the council and the health board doing to educate the public and staff to allow people with learning disabilities to feel safe in their community?
There's a few initiatives. Safe Places is obviously one of those, but there's also something called Pegasus, which has been devised by, it was started in South Wales Police, coming to Gwent Police, which is a system where people can pre-register with the police. So if they have communication issues, they can carry a card. If there's any issues, they can present that to an officer. It's got password, it's password protected. So there's information which would allow the police to deal with issues sooner. There's also a Keep It Safe scheme also being considered by Gwent Police. There's a few different initiatives which have been piloted and involve people with learning disabilities in their design as well.
Is it all right if I...
Yep.
One of the other things, different work stream, which is our Mental Health Crisis Care Concordat work, which is partnership work, and the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner is just funding mental health professionals to be in the police control room so they can respond to calls, which may be from people, any vulnerable person, they can respond to calls and signpost people and support them to help to keep them safe. So I think that's a really positive development.
Jim?
Yeah, just thinking about it, we've also, the People First group as Cosgwen have been involved with the Acton Police Commissioner's funding to develop some resources around hate crimes, make some films and some leaflets, etc. So people are more aware, what is a hate crime, what do I do about it, what happens if I'm a victim of crime. So hopefully that awareness will help people keep them safer as well. Sorry.
Sorry.
So, quick supplementary question. Yeah, they're really good strategies that are going in place, aren't they? But thinking before people with learning disabilities need to get to that stage where they report they're feeling anxious or in a crisis, etc. What can we actually do to educate the public? So to educate the bus drivers when people with learning disabilities are using facilities, going to cafes, etc. We've got dementia-friendly Torvine. Can something similar be put in place?
Yeah, there is autism-friendly communities as well as dementia friends. I think that just general friendliness in the communities is really important, and people being aware, more open to people with different issues and conditions. I think things like dementia friends help because it just gives that greater awareness and greater understanding. But also, like I said, with this autism friends and autism awareness training too.
Yeah, it is a really good point, but I guess it is everybody's business. I think it's whilst social care will certainly always reinforce that. It is not just around social care or adult social care. It is everybody's business in the council to challenge where they see inappropriate behaviour and any contact that anybody has with some of the learning disabilities to kind of reinforce just through that equality of the conversation and the interaction with that person. It's about how everybody interacts with that person to ensure that actually they fully
recognise and understand that they are unequal and absolutely would challenge as everybody else, as any one of us would do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I don't want to sound negative, but when I was out canvassing on the doors a few months back, I did come across a few people who felt very isolated because they were finding it impossible to go on public transport without escorts and things. And while they were applying, people were partially sighted and blind people applying for specialist I think it's forms that they have to fill in that come back that allow them to go with escorts. These seem to be taking a very long time. I just wondered if you've come across this sort of thing where some people are very isolated because processes don't happen quick enough to allow them to feel supported.
I'm not aware of those particular incidents. However, we have appointed a number of community connectors. Again, focusing on the preventative work and enabling people to be more independent. And certainly those are areas of work that the community connectors have picked up. We were fortunate enough to be able to expand the community connectors last year with the funding from the Intermediate Care Fund. Sorry, I keep on getting it there. Having that in my mind for the last 5 years, it's very difficult to change the title. So I'm not aware of any instance where it's been taking a long time. We do have a transport policy that we implemented and we are reviewing as a council. Whereas again, it's working, as Jim alluded to earlier, it's about working on people's strengths. So it is about ensuring that maybe they can access the appropriate training to be able to use transport rather than focusing on them having to have an escort at all times. So again, as I say, that's the focus that we're taking, about enabling that person to be able to do that themselves rather than reliant on another person. But if there are any individual cases, if you could feed that through the members' inquiry system, then certainly I'll look into those cases.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I wonder if we could have information, all members really, about the community connectors.
Yes, certainly. If there's anything specific that you want, they're regularly quite happy to share. Again, through the evaluation process, we have quarterly reports on the number of clients they've seen and the outcomes. Would it be helpful if, I think that the report that I had in April is kind of a synopsis of kind of the activity for the year. If I circulate that would give you an idea of the type of work that they're doing. And then if there is any additional information that you would like, then by all means come back to me. Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Right. Have you considered approaching the Council's licensing committee to advise on whether it is appropriate for taxi drivers and door personnel to be made aware of the Safe Place scheme through the work of the licensing committee?
Yes.
But this work to be carried on. We have considered it. It's something that's been done in Monmouthshire, and it's something that I think the steering groups in Cumbraen and Pontypool and Blenavon would want to take forward as well. They've said they would like to take that forward. Okay.
Do you consider the rate of progress of actions against recommendations satisfactory, and if so, why?
I hope members today would have noted the amount of work that is being taken forward in relation to the areas that were highlighted. I think the areas that were the specific areas highlighted in the recent report, I think it was 5 areas for the local authority. Set equipment, as I've already mentioned, we have a new pathway in place. Engagement with the public, I think certainly Jim's work and presentation around the co-production and the work of the Better Lives have produced. And I think, not to blow Jim's trumpet, but I mean, I think that's
I would suggest that that's some of the best work in Wales that is being carried out locally, that is in the true sense of co-production. The work in the third sector, whilst I recognise that's ongoing, as the point that I made earlier, it is going to take some time to change the models of care, but we've had, say, some good examples of working with the RSLs and the workshops that Jim has been leading across Gwent and locally. But what I would say, when you are looking at changing different service models, it is also about changing and working around expectations of users, carers, public members, because sometimes we have a few examples of where an existing model of care might be changing, and users and carers are very wedded to what they know. And that's the really hard bit, because it's about changing people's views about, because there is a mindset of, this is what I know, this is what I like. Whilst we know from the research that Jim has done, actually there's some really good models that would kind of deliver better outcomes. But it's hard sometimes to sell that, where so people are kind of like, well, they don't want to know that. So I know I'm putting that quite simplistically, but that's the hard bit. So changing the models. We've got all the research, and believe me that Jim's research is like that. So we know kind of like the best models right across the world, really, not just locally or into the UK. But changing that, it's not just about having those workshops with the providers to say, what do you think of this and this? It is about the work, and say the direct work with the users, which Jim has been leading. But it's a wider change about people's managing people's expectations. So sorry, that was the third sector. The other areas around the review of the strategy, and Julie, you might want to comment on that, if that's okay.
Just to say that there's been a Gwent LD strategy that was in place from 2012 to 2017, which the Mental Health and Learning Disability Partnership Board secured funds from the Integrated Care Fund to appoint a project manager through third sector, with a view to evaluating the progress that was made against that strategy. And it is a strategy across Gwent in terms of all the partner agencies. So we have a project manager in post, as I say, commissioned through third sector, who's currently evaluating that, doing a massive amount of engagement, and also linking in with a lot of the engagement work that Jim did through the Better Lives consultation and engagement, with a view to then pulling all that together to see what the vision is going to be and the strategic direction going forward beyond 2017. We're expecting some of that work to have been completed by the end of this year and to go back to Mental Health and LD Partnership Board around about December, January time. So.
And the final 2 points, Chair, that were kind of in the action plan that were highlighted by CSSIW, obviously the focus on quality assurance, which I think I've kind of already addressed, and then the support for employment, which is an area I think we all recognise that we would want to progress, and as Jim said, that is work that Keith Rutherford is also involved in as a lead director for Gwent. So that is a piece of work that will progress, but it is around trying to engage the commitment then across the local authorities and the health board and the wider community as well. And I know that's certainly an area that Jim's very passionate around. So I think that we are making significant progress. I think, as I said earlier, Chair, I think we actually started from quite a good position as well. So I hope that you are reassured around the progress and the work that we are currently completing.
Thank you very much. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. It would be remiss of us really not to thank Jim for his presentation. There's a lot of work gone into it, and I'm sure we all look forward to the benefits that may arise out of your work, Jim. Thank you very much.
I'd like to echo that, and thank you very much indeed for the presentation. You did say on the end of it that there's a copy of it that's available. And save us all asking individually, maybe we could be copied in with that, please. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And the invitees for attending and contributing to the meeting. It surely opened my eyes. Thank you very much. May I remind members what's been asked of the Scrutiny Committee to consider when coming up with their recommendations. Chair, to ask members for their thoughts in formulating the recommendations.
Chair, can I come in first? I think the dolls information we received was a little bit worrying, really. I mean, I know there's constraints around finance with the legal aspect and everything else, but it does concern me greatly the number of people that are still waiting for outcomes on the dolls, and I think we should reflect our concern.
Thank you.
I'd like to, I'd like to back Councillor who had just spoken in that I was quite concerned about the dolls, and I think I would have liked to know more about the triage system that they were working on.
Deacon.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. In the previous Scrutiny Committee, we received a full report on the deprivation of liberty process. I can share that report. It's in the public domain. I can share that report with you. And in there's quite detailed information on the triage process and how, as an authority and across Gwent, the capacity is being managed. So I can share that report with you, and if anybody else, any other members would like that report, I can forward that to you as well.
Thank you, that'd be useful.
I think it would have been useful to have that report before this meeting, in hindsight, Ellen, but I would welcome that report as well.
Do members have any recommendations they'd like to make?
Well, the one that came from the inspector was the ongoing bit, where it should be perhaps a review date, so that we're aware of when it's been reviewed or not. So a recommendation for that, I think.
Okay, listening to your questioning and the debate that came after, I've written down a few notes of recommendations you may want to make. Would you like me to go through them and you say whether you'd like to recommend or not?
Yes. Can I make a further recommendation? Was touched on you this morning, was around the perhaps Torvine being an exemplary authority in regards to employing people with disabilities. Could we make that a recommendation? Members in an agreement.
Before Ellen goes into transport. When we were in Cumbrae, we had a lot of talk from the students or disabled people about transport. All right, years ago we had plenty of money and we used to bring them in by minibuses and things like that. But the one place that we went to, the only access that he got is a number 15 bus, and I Trevethin, it's a number 15 bus that will go through. And on that bus, on all buses anyway, there's only one disabled place. And if they are not on that disabled place, if somebody's already in that disabled place, the bus driver won't let anybody else on. And I think that, you know, we should review transport. You say, the one girl there, she emphasised the X24 bus, where one of the drivers said that, you know, you can't come on, I'm already full. There's another one around, another one coming up in 10 minutes. So, you know, I think we should emphasise the transport side of it as well.
I was out talking to Lenny in the week about this because he obviously drives for Stagecoach, and he was saying the same thing as what he said to us, Mike, that if there's two people turn up with a wheelchair, the first one goes on and the driver says wait for another vehicle. Well, sometimes another vehicle is 10 minutes, but sometimes it's half an hour, so that is a problem.
Okay, I've noted those recommendations. Listening to your discussions, you may want to recommend a formal review date is established for the action plan. You may want to recommend strengthen the potential of third sector providing social activities. Other services to continue to build on and improve their QA processes. I think Joe Pratt has said, you know, there's always room for improvements. You may want to recommend that they focus on that. You may want to make a recommendation to CSIW that they consider employment issues as part of their thematic reviews.
I think that's not only the health board, I think this council as well could review their employment. I know they have a questionnaire, don't they? Do you consider yourself to have a disability? But they don't proactively go out and employ disabled people, I don't think.
And the last one I have is you may want to note in your response to officers that substantial and innovative progress has been made against the action plan. That's all I have, so if you have anything else.
I did mention about the concern about the high number of the dolls.
Yeah, I got that.
Also, so with the Joe question, what is the Council and Health Board doing to educate the public staff and allow people with learning disabilities to feel safe in their communities? I think there also we need to be addressing the community more of awareness and perhaps looking and saying to communities what are, you know, and explaining more to community and residents about disabilities and the effects that why they're not feeling safe in their home homes. So perhaps we could be addressing that more.
So would that be some sort of like awareness campaign similar to the dementia-friendly communities along those lines? Yeah.
Yeah, if we could recommend that we develop something similar to dementia friendly, that would be perfect. It could start off with a social media campaign.
Yeah.
They talked about films they've been making, so we can develop some empathy and understanding in the communities so that people with learning disabilities feel more comfortable.
You know, even that person might have a disability that affects them, their mobility. Their mental health is also a disability. I think we need to be, like Joe just said, by social media or some form of group to be educating, if that's the right word, the members of the public about the effects that it can have on somebody with a disability, be it physical, be it verbal.
Okay, noted.
Sorry, could I just ask, is it possible for us to keep note of hate crimes and things and to to bring that into recommendation, that we're noting how much of that is out there, so as we can do more public awareness and more helping to stop that sort of thing from happening?
I think that would be included in any sort of scheme such as the dementia-friendly communities. Hate crime comes under a different committee as a subject, but certainly it would be included. We can say, you know, to include that sort of thing in awareness raising.
Anything more? Right, the next meeting of the Althea Communities.
Sorry, I was just thinking, is there any way that we can see the impact on benefits as well, on how people with disabilities are coping within the community, or is that too big a piece of work?
I can do some research around that for you and see whether it can be added to the work programme. I'd have to check whether it comes under the committee's portfolio.
Okay. Thank you.
At the next meeting of the Althea Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be held on the 23rd of November 2017. The subject will be safeguarding in education, developing the safeguarding agenda in schools. I'd like to thank members for turning up and thank you very much. Close the meeting.
It'll be 10 a.m, same as today.